Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Selvakumar from the Department of Maritime History and Marine Archaeology, Tamil University, Tanjavur. Under the subject of Indian culture, we have a paper titled Indian Polity. Under this, we have a module Cholas, the state and central administration. So, in this module, we are going to look into state and the central administration under the Cholas. How was the state acted under the Cholas and how was the central administration functioned under the Cholas? These are our objectives. Let us look into the learning objectives of this particular lesson. The purpose of this lesson is to know about the medieval Chola dynasty. Very briefly, we will introduce the Cholas to understand the nature of the Chola state and polity, to know about the central administration of the Cholas. These are the main objectives of this particular lesson. So let us look into the Cholas very briefly about their history. The history of the Chola dynasty dates back to the early historic or Sangam age, but they had disappeared in the early medieval period, say from 5th to 9th century. Perhaps they were a chiefly family when the Pallavas and Pandyas dominated Tamil Nadu. The medieval Cholas again raised around the middle of the 9th century CE. That means they emerged much stronger and they controlled many parts of South India. They even expanded up to Southeast Asia. That is why the history of Chola is taking so much of interest from many scholars across the world. The Cholas ruled from Tanjavur. Tanjavur was their capital. The capital of the Cholas was shifted to Gangikonda Cholapuram by Rajendra I for reasons unknown. Their rule spanned from approximately 850 CE to 1279 CE. They ruled for about 400 years in major parts of South India. The Chola Empire had a maritime dimension. They had sway over parts of Sri Lanka. They had interfered with the Southeast Asian political affairs, at least for a brief span of time in the 11th century CE. So we can say Cholas were a maritime empire controlling parts of southern India and also the maritime space, especially on the eastern side, Bay of Bengal and beyond up to the route leading to China. The Cholas issued a vast number of epigraphs, stone as well as copper plates. Generally, there is abundance of inscription for the period than any other cultural period. The Chola history is interesting because of the abundance of inscription that offer information on various aspects of Chola history. You get minute details on various social, cultural and economic aspects of Chola history. The Cholas are well known for the all-round developments and achievements in the area of administration, art and architecture. In a sense, we could say Chola period was a vibrant period in the history of South India. Research on the Cholas. Coming to the research on the Cholas, several scholars have worked on the Cholas right from the early 20th century. The history of Cholas have attracted the attention of several researchers. The inscriptions of the Cholas were documented and published by the Archaeological Survey of India and are still being documented by many researchers. Their history has been researched on the basis of inscription by Vengaya. The noted historian K. A. Neelakanta Sastri extensively used the inscription of the Cholas to understand the various aspects of Chola rule. Extensive research has been undertaken on the Cholas by Noboru Karashima. Y. Subbarayulu and Karoshima have worked systematically on the inscription of the Cholas using computer techniques and statistical analysis right from the 1960s. Y. Subbarayulu's work on the political geography of the Chola country mapped and traced the historical geography of the Chola country based on the inscriptions. Bertenstein studied and researched on the Chola history and argued that the Chola state was segmentary entity. The idea of segmentary entity proposed by Bertrand Stein has been criticized by several researchers. S.R. Balasubramanian has published on the temples of Cholas, and numerous documentations have been undertaken on the art and architecture of the Cholas. R. Chambaglakshmi has studied the Cholas settlements, religion and iconography. Kenneth Hall has worked on the economy under the Cholas. P. Shanmugam has researched on the revenue and administrative system of the Cholas. Scholars including G.W. Spencer, Herman Kulke, Thomas Trotman, Leslie Orr, Mahalashmi, Dawood Ali, and several other researchers have focused on various aspects of medieval South India as well as the Cholas. The Cholas maritime expedition and maritime activities have been researched by Herman Kulke and Tansen Sen and several other researchers. So these researchers have shed light on the various aspects of Chola state, polity, as well as the central administration. That's what we are going to look into detail now. The administration under the Cholas was much more improved than it was under the early Pandyas and the Pallavas. New administrative methods and better approach to management are seen in the Chola administration. The inscriptions offer information on king's duties and performance. The Cholas expanded their territory gradually through military activities. The princes were placed to administer the conquered territories. We see a lot of new innovation and development and territorial control during the time of the Cholas. The appointment of the princes is seen during the reign of Rajendra I in the case of Pandyan country. After conquering the Pandyan country, they appointed a prince to take over. The chiefly powers who existed in the early years of the Cholas were removed. In the middle phase, in the imperial phase of Cholas, at least say from late part of 10th century when Rajaraja I took over, the chiefly powers disappeared. So we have the early phase of Cholas in which the chiefly powers who had independent existence, they had marital alliance with Cholas, they gradually disappear in the imperial phase. So Cholas take over the core area of Chola country literally by controlling, by eliminating all the chiefly powers. Probably they were incorporated as officers in the Chola administration. This is very clear from the inscriptions that are found from say 10th and 11th century. The Chola country was divided into smaller territories for administrative purpose. The new administrative divisions came into being from the time of the Rajaraja I. New taxes were levied, the army was reformed, army camps were established in different parts of the country to protect the country as well as to take new expeditions across South India. Chola Navy must have also been very well organized, although it might have been active on occasions whenever there was a need for overseas or across the sea expeditions. Local administration was also improved and organized. The Chola administration weakened during the reign of Klotunga I, say in the end of 11th century. The local chiefs became powerful from the 12th century. The influence of Pandya and the Hoysala powers, which came into being after say 11th and 12th century, they also disturbed the administrative system of the Cholas. Thereby, Chola administrative system began to weaken in the later period. What you see in this image is the Tanjavur Bragadiswara temple. This temple also symbolizes the Chola state and polity and power. The Cholas supported the construction of the temples and also they gave a lot of donations to the temples as well as to the Brahmins. By creating so many temples across the landscape, they could control the landscape. What you see in this particular image is another magnificent temple at Gangaikonda Cholapuram built by Rajendra Chola. This is also another important temple. You see beautiful architecture and also its massiveness. Probably Cholas felt they need massive temples to match their state and also to symbolically suggest that they were very powerful. The sculptural style and also bronze also improved under the Cholas. This particular image of Chandesha Anugraha Murti is found at Gangikonda Chodapuram. It is a beautiful piece of image that exhibits the artistic talent of the Chola craftspersons. Chola temples were also built across the sea. We have a temple in Polonnaruwa in Sri Lanka. We have 2-3 temples of Shiva, and they also have Chola inscriptions. They prove the overseas activities of the Cholas in Sri Lanka. Now let's go into the chronological scheme of the Cholas. Before going into the administrative system, we need to understand the chronological scheme briefly. This chronological scheme was presented by Professor Y. Subrayulu. Y. Subrayulu has classified the Chola history into 4 sub-periods, and he has analyzed the political developments according to these phases. Period 1, 850 to 985 CE. Period 2, 986 to 1070 CE. Period 3, 1071 to 1178 CE. Period 4, 1179 to 1279 CE. So when we talk about Chola period, we can't treat all the periods as one. Things change. When we are dealing with 400 years, we can't expect right from year 1 to 400, Chola administration remained perfectly same and static. It changed. Therefore, this classification is very much essential. So coming to the territory, how Cholas controlled the territory, what were the territories that were under their rule, how they named them. We will look at them through these slides. The Cholas ruled mainly in the territory of the Kaveri Delta when the Vijayalaya, the first king, conquered and established the Chola Empire. The fertile Kaveri Delta and its agrarian produce in fact supported the empire building activities that formed the core of Chola activities. The Kaveri Delta was their core area of sphere. From there they could conquer, they could send expedition to various other regions. The Cholas gradually expanded their empire. They incorporated Thondai Mandalam, which is northern part of Tamil Nadu, Nadunadu, which is the northern part of Tamil Nadu, very close to Chola and around Viluppuram area, Kongu Nadu, which is Coimbatore region, Pandi Nadu, which is in southern Tamil Nadu, south of Madurai. They incorporated all these areas into their territory. By about 11th century, they had become a strong political power in South India. They also conquered Tagadur, which is near Salem, Dharmaburi region, Nolambavadi, Gangabadi, Kodagu in Karnataka region, Vengi in Andhra region, and also parts of Sri Lanka. Their area of coverage varied and also their control varied because the enemy kings were also reconquering. So it was fluid. It was fluid in the sense that they were gaining some areas, losing some areas, but the core area was there under their control. We can say they were controlling major parts of South India. The territorial divisions of Chola are listed here. You can see Chola country, Kaveri Delta, Thondai Nadu, Northern Tamil Nadu, Pandi Nadu, South Tamil Nadu, Kongu Nadu, Coimbatore region, Tadihaipadi, Southern Karnataka, Nolambapadi, again Southern Karnataka, Gangapadi, Southern Karnataka, Kudamalai, again Coorg or Kudagu region, Southern Karnataka, Rattabadi, it is also part of Southern Karnataka, and Reynadu, Vengi, they are part of Andhra Pradesh region. These were the territories that were under control, and they were classifying these territories as mandalams. This was one important step. Earlier, the core Chola country was known as Chola Nadu. Nadu means country or territory. Now, they adopt a new terminology called mandalam. This was introduced by Rajaraja in 1009 CE, 1009 CE, and Chola Nadu became a Chola Mandalam, which means they have clearly expanded out of Chola country and they incorporated so many mandalams. Whatever the territory that they conquered became a mandalam. For example, Sri Lanka became Ira Mandalam. So we have evidence of Jayangunda Sola Mandalam referring to Thondai Nadu, Pandi Nadu again becomes Rajaraja Mandalam. Like that, we have several mandalams coming as part of Chola territory, which itself suggests that they are adopting new terminology, bringing different regions as subunit of Chola Empire. Again, we have another subdivision under Mandalam. There is something called Valanadu. Valanadu literally means fertile territory. These divisions were created out of the natural boundary of the rivers. Valanadu is the area normally which lies between two rivers. It was first introduced in the areas of Pandya, south of Madurai. Later on, it was adopted by the Cholas, especially by Rajaraja. So these Valanadus were given the title of the Chola kings. If you look at the Nadu divisions had the natural title of the villages. Here, the Valanadus are given the title of the king. In a sense, the king's authority is exercised over a territory by naming the areas into different territories after the kings. So in a sense, it indirectly exercises the power symbolically by naming the territory. The very name, when you want to utter the name of a territory, you have to obviously utter the name of the king. So it indirectly reinforces their authority over the territory. This was one of the methods adopted by the Cholas to symbolically control the territory. Territorial divisions, again we have these Valanadus. We have Arunmozhi Deva Valanadu, Keralaandha Valanadu, Kshatriya Singamani Valanadu, Nityavidoda Valanadu, Pandya Gulasadi Valanadu, Rajaraja Valanadu, Rajeshwara Valanadu, Rajendra Simha Valanadu, Uyakondar Valanadu, Umbalanadu. See, these divisions were named after the kings, as I mentioned already. Again, we have more evidence of Valanadus occurring in the Pandi Mandalam. They were created after 1021 CE. We have evidence of Rajendra Sola Valanadu, Madurantaka Valanadu, Mudigonda Sola Valanadu, Uttama Chola Valanadu. In the Tondai Mandalam, that is in northern part of Tamil Nadu, they did not change. They were using the old terms of Kotam. We have Amur, Sembur, Sengadu, Ikatu, Indur, several Kotams having these names. In addition to that, in between Tondai Mandalam and Chola country, there were these Nadus like Oima Nadu, Parangala Nadu, Pangala Nadu, like those territories existing in between these. These were the important territorial divisions under the Cholas. Then we have another categories called Nadus and Kutam, which are much smaller units. We can compare them to the modern day Taluk. If we compare Mandalam to a state, then we can compare a Valanadu to a district, then we can compare Nadu to a Taluk. Nadu and Kutram, they are more or less same in the meaning. Sometimes they use Kutram, the word Kutram, which can mean cluster. So there existed several Nadus within the Mandalam. Chola Mandalam had 56 Nadus. They became 140 at the end of the Chola reign, and which clearly shows that they were creating new Nadus and trying to improve agriculture for some other reason. Rajaraja first created 49 new Nadus. Their area varied from 20 to 140 square kilometer. So these activities clearly indicate the improvement in the administration. Even today, the government sometimes goes for smaller territories, smaller state or smaller regions for better administrative purpose. So Y. Subrayadu opines that the Nadus were within the defined area of irrigation. Only later on they became a territorial division. Originally, Nadu perhaps evolved out of natural growth, maybe from the Iron Age period. In the medieval time, they acquired some administrative significance after the emergence of Chola or other polities. Now, let's look into the king. What was the role of the king and how he exercised his power over the territory? We get several inscriptions which tell us about the king and his role. And the Cholas adopted the monarchy system. The king was the central authority of the Chola Empire. The kings adopted Sanskrit titles. That is very important measure they took. They always adopted Sanskrit titles to make them different from ordinary citizens. They alternatively adopted the title Rajagesari Varman and Paragesari Varman. These titles were used by the kings alternatively. If one king is Rajagesari Varman, the next will be known as Paragesari Varman. Again, the title Varman is very important. Varman actually signifies the Kshatriya status. The status of the kings increased from an ordinary chief in the 9th century to that of an emperor in the 11th century. The title Ko, which in Tamil means leader, was used in the initial period, and later the title Udayar was used. In the early period, the title Peruman Adigal was used, and in the later period, Udayar, even Ulagudayar, Nayanar were also adopted. Veerarajendra used the title Chakravarti and Tribhuna Chakravarti. So clearly you can see the kings were moving away from the people by adopting very pompous titles like Chakravarti, and it shows that they were increasing their status symbolically and distancing themselves from the people. The king and his authority as revealed by the titles. The king's titles were given to the villages, jewels, measures, territories, fields, places, villages, and administrative divisions, and even to craftsmen. You will see everywhere the name of the king prefixed to a craftsperson's name. Say Rajaraja Perundachan, the person probably who constructed the Tanjavur Bragadishwara temple. So here, why they were doing this? Probably they were exercising their authority symbolically. The kings were polygamous. The kings had multiple wives. The kings took wives from the chiefly families, and this helped them to consolidate their political relationship. They were building political relationship through marriage and wedding with the royal families, and they had relationship with the Eastern Chalukyas. That is very well known. The succession was through primogeniture, that means a father and then son. That is how the succession goes. The princes had the title Pillayar, and they did not have much role, but they participated in the battles. In some cases, they were looking after the provinces. The coronation ceremony was undertaken by the Brahmins, and the Brahmins offered a lot of titles to the kings during the time of coronation. The king and his authority, Sanskrit titles were given and Puranic lineages were attributed to the king. The Cholas traced their origin to the solar race. The king took over the conquered territory. They took the title as Udayar, which means that they are the owner of the territory. The Mekirti of the Cholas, which we find from the time of Rajaraja I, declares their might, power and rights through the poetic expression. King was considered equal to God. They, as I already mentioned, they took the title Udayar, Devar and Perumal. The Tanjavur temple was known as Rajarajeshwaram. Here you can see the name of the king is given to the shrine also, Rajaraja Ishwaram. It is probably indicating a symbolic power. Again, the adoption of certain themes for painting and also iconography in the illustration of images around the sanctorum of Tanjavur Bragadishwara temple, we see Tripurandaka image occurring very frequently. This has something to do with the royal scheme, a symbolic way to achieve power, and this argument has been put forward by Professor Chambaga Lakshmi. The king and his authority and the Brahmins. The Brahmins and Sanskrit plays an important role in legitimizing the authority of the king. The Itikasa Purana ideas, Sanskrit and Brahmins played an important role in legitimizing the kingship. Adoption of titles, Puranic lineage, temple construction and complex iconography did contribute to the polity and the authority of the king. The Brahmadeyas supported the king's authority. This is a statement presented by Karashima. The temples too helped kings to exercise power over the territory. The modification of traditional community structures with the use of Brahmin settlements and creation of new territories and officialdom and the control of communal corporate bodies did help the establishment of Chola authority, and it helped Cholas to make a very strong polity in this particular area. These were the important measures adopted by the Cholas. Let's look into the royal family and its succession. Princes were anointed as kings even when the monarch was alive. They started issuing inscription in their own name. Perhaps this was done for smooth transfer of power and to avoid vacuum after the demise of the king or because of some other reasons. Sometimes the son did not naturally acquire the throne. The elderly member of the royal family were chosen for the throne. After Parandaka II, his cousin Uttama Chola took the power instead of his son Rajaraja first, perhaps because of the young age of Rajaraja or due to other factors. We do not get the details. Similarly, we get several cases in the Chola history, and after the Veera Rajendra, we have Vengi Chalukyas taking over power. We see a shift from 1070 CE. We can understand that several factors played an important role why a particular person succeeded the other king. We may not be able to get into the details. Maybe if we get some evidence, we may be able to understand. Definitely we can expect that there were struggles for power to get the throne. That is why we see these changes in the succession. The kings again had an important role, as we already saw. They donated land to the Brahmanas and performed various rituals, for example, Hiranyagarbha and Tulabharam, just to ascertain their power. They took the title of the according to the area that they conquered. For example, after conquering, they took Madurai Konda, Kadaram Konda. After conquering Southeast Asia, Kadara or Kedah. They, after conquering Bengal or Gangai region, they took the title Gangai Konda. Similarly, they adopted title Agava Malla Kulagalan, Kerala Andaka. They all indicate a symbolic way of subordinating or subduing the conquered territory. So this play, word play, adopting title and giving name to the territory played an important role in sustaining power and spreading the power over the landscape and territory. The duties of the kings, let's see here what are the duties of the kings. So he was the supreme authority, chief of justice, total leadership was under him. His responsibility was protecting the people, and also in the some of the later inscription we get reference to that they try to protect the Manu Dharma. Obviously they must have tried to establish the rules of the old text, because Cholas obviously took Sanskrit titles. They were supporting Brahmanas, and some of the ideas of their rule, they come from the Dharma Sastras. So it's no wonder they were supporting these traditional values, and also they were protecting the countries. And coming to the next line, we have princes who were taking care of the territory, and they were doing number of activities. They supported the king in administration. They led the army in expeditions, and even the subordinates and chiefly families supported the king as well as the princes. We have evidence of these Paduvettarayar, Malavar, and Kodumbalur Velirs and Gangas, Gongucholas. They were playing a role in supporting the king and the entire system. And these subordinates, they took the title Arayan or Vel or Rajan, and sometimes they also took the title of the Chola king's name. As I already saw, the Chola capital was shifted from Tanjavur to Gangaikonda Cholapuram for a brief period, and probably again Tanjavur was used as a capital. We also have evidence of royal palaces existing in various places like Tiruvarur, Madurai, Kanchipuram and Chidambaram, and the kings were probably visiting and issuing orders from those places. So the king's activities were covering over a vast area across the territory. By building palaces, by making donation from different areas, they could ascertain their authority. Now we will come into the general administration of the Cholas. Actually, regarding the official dam, we have several views, and Noburo Karashima and Y. Subbarayalu, they have studied the inscription in detail to understand the distribution of the various officials and their titles according to the four periods that we saw above. And Bertenstein, who worked on the Cholas polity and state, argued that it was a segmentary state, and he doubted if there was any official dam. any officials or bureaucracy in a systematic way. According to Sastri, there was no ministry in the Cholas, and we have a lot of evidence for officers functioning under the Cholas. They are mentioned frequently in the inscription. There are two categories of officers known as Perundaram and Sirudaram. Perundaram is a higher category, Sirudaram is probably a lower category. The Chola kingdom had several officers called Adhikari, Strikaryam, Naduvagai, and then from the time of Uttama Chola we have evidence for Provari, Naduvirikai, Volai, and Y. Subbarayalu divides the administrative system of the Cholas into 4 grades. Mainly the officers are officers as well as royal personals. They are divided into 4 categories. On the top we have king, and the next line we have Adhikari, Senadipati, and Provari, Thinekalam, Naduvirikai. Then in the next line we have Strikaryam, Naduvagai, and then Senapati and Adhikari. Then lower cadre we have soldiers, Brahmanas, and Karanam and Muhaviti. So we have a clear hierarchy in the officialdom, and that supports the entire organized administrative component of the Cholas. We have evidence for defense administration. We have references to different kinds of armies. We have evidence for army, cavalry, and elephantry, and also chariot warriors. And then we have evidence for 30 to 70 divisions in the army according to scholars, and also we have several references to different components of army, right? Like elephant mahouts who were controlling elephantry, and we have Villigal who were actually archers. Then we have Kudurai Chavagas who were cavalry. Then we have Anukkar, and then Parivaratar, Velaikarapadai, which is again one division of army. Thirumai Kaparar, they are basically something like a black cat protecting the king from a very close range. Then we also have reference to Parampadai. In addition, we have reference to Velakara Perumpadai, Kaikola Perumpadai, archers, swordsmen, and we have several references. We have an inscription from Karnataka which mentions about 9 lakh warriors in the infantry of the Cholas, which may be exaggerated, but we are not sure. But considering the conquest they made, we can be sure that Chola had a huge army. Again, Chinese source Chaujukua mentions that Cholas had 60,000 elephants in the elephantry, which is again looks a huge figure, but definitely they had elephantry also, that is very sure. The next important component in administration is taxation. The land tax was called Irai. Land was properly surveyed and proper books called Variputham were maintained. The land was completely documented, every nook and corner very accurately measured, and the land was taxed. These documents were preserved in a place called Avana Kalari. Land was classified into various grades and according to their productivity, and they were taxed accordingly. We have evidence for more than 500 terms related to tax in Chola inscription. Y. Subbarayalu suggests that the rate of taxation varied. It could be 1/3 of the wetlands produce and 1/5 of the dry land produce. Probably that went to the government, and this information is found in a Kolar inscription. And Subbarayalu says the land tax could be around 40% in general. Again, it varied. And also we have evidence for taxing various crafts like textile, pottery, and oil making and everything. So Chola government was getting a lot of income from this taxation. We also have evidence of a very good revenue department. Many officials were involved in taxation. We have Provari Thinekalam, which is actually a revenue department. Provari Thiraikala Nayakam, who is a supervisor. Kankani, also a supervisor. Sri Karnam, Naduvai, Muhavetti, Variputtaha Kanakku, Varilidu, and Patolai. They were all working under these officers. Some of them were given the title Muvendha Velan, and these people acquired Muvendha Velans. And Mandala Mudali was another title given to the chiefs during the time of Klothunga. And we have evidence for treasury. Cholas had a central treasury, and the Tanjavur temple had also another separate treasury. And the military expedition also gave a lot of wealth to the Cholas. Plunder was one of the means, and we get a lot of references to that. They were plundering jewels and other precious metals and materials, and they were, some of them were donated to the temples. So they had different means of generating resources. The king was chief of the justice. Perhaps Dharma Sastra rules were adopted. We get some indication. Inscriptions also mention about Dharma Sasana. Probably it referred to a seat in the temple when somebody did not honor the certain endowments, they had to pay fine at Dharma Sasana. That is a reference we get inscriptions. And also we get reference to Madhyasthar and Naduvirikai as justice. And killing the prince was considered a Rajadroha, and murder, theft, misappropriation of temple property were also punished. Sabha and Urars and the village assemblies and merchant association, they too offered justice in some case, and payment of fine and also confiscation of land and lighting of temples for certain crime, they were offered as punishment for various crimes. And Chola polity and administration. Let's look into the nature of the Chola state. There are several debates on that. Earlier, it was argued the Chola state was well organized, centralized state with bureaucratic establishment, and K. Nilakanta Sastri argued it was like a Byzantine royalty. The idea of strong Chola state was not accepted by Bernstein. He presented the idea in his book Peasant State and Society in Medieval South India about the segmentary nature of the state. He used the model of Southall, who applied it to the East African kingdom. He says that the Chola state was segmentary in nature with the role of peasant bodies, and he argues that it was not a monolithic entity having a complete control over the territory. So he says that Chola state had a limited territorial authority from the core to the periphery. Probably in the core it had higher authority. They had no monopoly as a legitimate state authority. It had two authority as a political authority and ritual sovereignty. And Nadu acted as a segment under the chiefs with it, who had the titles such as Udayar and Muvendha Velars. The land grants and the presidencies supported the royal influence and ritual sovereignty. That is the argument presented by Bernstein. It was an alliance of social formations like cultivators, artisans, herdsmen with a supra-local authority. Local segments gave the foundation for the Chola state. There was a pyramidal structure with the monarch on the top with sacred and temporal authority. Karashima does not agree with this view. He takes a slightly different view and seeks to understand the society using the inscription. He says that Chola state was more integrated. Why Subrayulu argues that it was an early form of state. It was a small kingdom in the early stage, and segmentary state concept could be applied to the early phase of the Cholas. But from the time of Rajaraja, it was very integrated, and it was much stronger when compared to the early period. We have evidence for a centralized structures, and that emerged from the, say, late 10th century. But later on, what happened? The central authority weakened, probably due to agrarian crisis. The Chola state started falling apart from 12th century. And it is argued there were some fight or conflicts between bigger and smaller landlords. These are some of the important components of the state. If you look at the state as an organization, we can better understand by looking at the contemporary conditions. If you go to any villages, now you can see contemporary state is accessing so much power. Say if you take the case of 20 or 30 years back, one could freely take a lot of sand from the rivers. There was no state control because there was not much of competition for resources. But nowadays, state has so much control over this. But when we look into the historical evidence and inscription, we can understand state control was very limited and autonomous bodies were functioning all across. This could be understood if you look into the village styles, village assemblies that are functioning. That can tell you very clearly that villages were autonomous in the early period. Even if you look at some of the old literature and old novels, and they can tell you how villages were autonomous even in the early part of 20th century, even under the British rule. So coming to the summary of this lesson, the Cholas began to rule mainly in the territory of the Kaveri Delta when Vijayalaya conquered Thanjavur. Gradually, they expanded the rule over many areas of South India. The Chola adopted a monarchy system. The succession was through primogeniture. The kings adopted Brahminical rituals and Sanskrit titles as part of coronation. The princes were appointed to govern the provinces. The territory was divided into Mandalam, Valanadu, Kootram, and Nadu, and the division of Valanadu was created during the time of Rajaraja. Cholanadu became Chola Mandalam. Many of the territories became Mandalas. Stein doubted the existence of officialdom, and Sastri argued there was no ministry under the Cholas. We have evidence for officers existing. We have evidence for Perundaram and Chirudaram as two main divisions of Chola officials. And Chola kingdoms had various categories of officers like Adhikari, Srikaryam and Naduvagai. From the time of Uttama Chola, we also have evidence for Provari, Naduvirike and Volai. Subbarayalu divides the administrative system into 4 grades, and Sastri suggested a Byzantine model of state for Cholas. Bertenstein argued that there was no officialdom and Chola state was segmentary in nature. Namburi Karashima, based on the analysis of the inscription, argues it was Chola state was centralized, and Subbarayalu argues that Chola state was a kind of early form of state. So looking at all these, we can very well understand Chola state was in a sense organized. It was integrated in the middle part. In the early part, it was slightly weaker, and again it began to disintegrate in the terminal 12th and 13th centuries. And if you have any doubt, you can consult the e-text. If you have, again, you are welcome to log on EPG Pathshala website. Thank you.